learned a very valuable lesson from my grandmother. She was my most favorite person in the world. I idolized her, so I paid great attention to everything she said and everything she did. We called her Nona. Her real name was Brandina Valesi Ferroni Salenzi. She had warmth, she had wit, and she had wisdom. She only had grade 1 education, so she didn't know how to read or write, but that did not stop her from following the daily news, reading the Hamilton Spectator, looking at the pictures, knowing how to order something from Eaton's. She knew every clause in every document she signed with an X. My Nona would come to visit us when we lived in Thorold. She lived in Hamilton. When it was announced within the family that Nona was coming for a visit, it was like a town holiday. And every kid on the street lined the curb waiting for Nona's big arrival, because everyone knew the meals would be plentiful for everyone on the street. Nona would be driven to 26 White Avenue by a relative. And upon her arrival, we would jump up, run to the door, open it up, and greet her with our little open arms. She only ever came with 3 things. She had a handbag securely resting on her left wrist. She had a very small leather suitcase and a bottle of fresh Hamilton water. In my grandmother's simplistic mind, she believed that Hamilton Steel Company aired water was somehow fresher than Niagara water. It didn't matter. The first thing we would do is grab her suitcase and run into the house and hide it. Because in our young minds, we believed if we hide Nona's suitcase, she's not going home. Well, you see, we knew Nona would be sharing our room. My sister and I, we had twin beds, but we knew when Nona visited, we would be sleeping like spoons in the one twin bed while Nona occupied the other, at least until morning when the 2 of us would jump in to join her and feel her warmth. And we would run off to bed early, and we'd be up on our knees yelling, "Come on, Nona, hurry up. Come and tell us a story." Well, she could only tell us a story because she didn't know how to read. And Nona would just take her time as she swayed and waddled, and Catherine smiling at me because she knew my grandmother. And she'd waddle her way into the room. We'd say, "Come on, Nona, hurry up." Well, you see, my Nona didn't hurry up for anybody. She carried about 265. I got a lot to look forward to. Nona would look up and say, "Fia, I'm not ready yet." She would then work her way over to the edge of the bed. Now, you see, the men have been detained in here, but let me tell you something. As women, we were raised to believe that when we moved and positioned our body, our legs must remain parallel to each other at every turn, much like Lady Vanier herself. My Nona defied all that. My Nona would work her way over to the side of the bed, and the first thing she would do to support her girth is she would spread her legs with her bum pushing against the edge of the bed. And again, we'd say, "Come on, Nona, hurry up. Effie, I'm not ready yet." She would then very slowly and deliberately lower her arthritic body onto those sheets. And as she did, and her butt made contact with the linens beneath her, they billowed on all sides. And again, "Come on, Nona." Well, then we had to wait for the great undressing. Now, for the 5 gentlemen in the room, if right now we declared this a Story Slam pajama party, suddenly you would come to life. And I would issue out 56 flannelette nightgowns, and suddenly you're like this. "Oh, this ought to be interesting. I haven't seen skin in a while." Let me assure each one of you gentlemen, If, in fact, I did throw out the flannelettes on the count of 3, every female in this room is armed, skilled, talented, and resourceful enough to get out of her civvies into her flannelettes, and you guys wouldn't see 1 inch of skin. Well, then we had to wait for Nona to get out of her civvies into her flannelettes, and she'd wiggle out of her house dress, and she'd drop the flannelette on her shoulder, and then we had the benefit of the sound effects of her getting out of her corset. You remember the corset, opened up, it looked like a piece of drapery. And the first thing we'd hear is 26 sets of hooks and eyes. The laces, and ultimately zip the zippers, and suddenly there before our eyes spread out Nona on the bed. And again we'd go, Nona, come on, Effie, I'm not ready yet. She'd then get her gnarly arthritic hands, and she would grip her thundering thighs, and suddenly we would hear this. And we'd laugh, because you laugh at things you don't understand. And we'd say, Nona, what are you doing? Effie, it makes me feel good. You stand around all day, you cook, you clean, you talk to people, you listen to people's problems, you take it in all day, and you don't let it go? Effie, it comes out in other places. And at the time, our young minds didn't understand her concept. It was only later that we recognized that when you feel the tension and you gotta breathe deep and let it go, became one of the greatest stress release techniques for us to follow. It stayed with me. And on the evening of her last night on earth, as we were all gathered around her, and we basically were waiting for Nona to take that last breath. And it was labored and slow, her intake of air, because of the buildup of fluid in her lungs. And I went over to her and I whispered, come on, Nona, now's the time. You gotta let it go. And I used to say, let it go. It didn't happen immediately, but as we were still gathered around her, she did, in fact, take that last breath. And as she did, the menacing fluid that occupied her lungs seeped out of her pores. And it's an image I will never forget. But as I eased into adulthood, that became my mantra. Let it go. I'd say to the kids after a big loss, let it go. Joe would come home bitching about school. Let it go. Some things would happen, it would be like I was starting a motorcycle. Let it go. Well, basically, when I think back on the lesson from Nona, I realize that in her very simplistic ways, what she was saying is our bodies like a balloon. See, it's not just Kleenex you store down there, ladies. And really what she was saying is this is our body. Yeah. You have childhood dreams. I was going to be a professional athlete. And then an injury got in the way. The injury also came into play when I applied to university and had no marks. But I decided to go anyway and just hang around waiting to be accepted. While my parents hovered and hollered every phone call. I finally met the dream guy. It's a shame that he was separated and still teaching in a Catholic school, which led to him losing his job because of me. We were living happily in our family of 5, and suddenly a spinal cord injury to my husband meant that it would be my responsibility for all future heavy lifting and schlepping. I rode the bumpy ride with each of my 3 kids. I was around 40 when I discovered, and it didn't even take 23 plus me, but I inherited the worry gene. The phone rings at 11 at night. Your son's in the U.S. at school. Hello, Mom. What's my health card number? COVID comes into play. It puts a dent in my career around the same time. I lost 2 very special friends and had to deal with some serious family issues. Growing old with my partner, come on, it had an interruption. God had another plan. Widowhood is not for the weak. I can keep going with some of the stressors that you and I share. But basically what Nona was trying to teach us, when you feel the tension, when you feel the agito in your gut, for you fellow Italians, when all you have is you're consumed with the stress, if you don't have an outlet, what's apt to happen to this balloon? A slow leak, a pop-up, or suddenly an out-of-control situation. When you feel the tension, you gotta breathe deep and let it go. I thank my Nona for that particular lesson.